Welcome to Love to See It, a podcast about why women are going nuts over a gay hockey show.
Claire, and everyone listening, we're coming to the cottage.
Today, we're diving into the heated rivalry craze that doesn't seem to be waning, which is so funny because I remember before Christmas, Emma, you were like, we have to cover the heated rivalry finale immediately or the conversation will be over. And you were so good. You did an episode for Rich Text over the holiday break, but it turns out we could have literally covered it anytime during January.
I know. Look, how could we have predicted? We came to heated rivalry pretty early.
Yeah.
We were watching week to week.
Like many straight women, we were there at the beginning of this gay romance phenomenon. We made
I'm
this.
proud. I'm proud of us. But I couldn't anticipate how it would take over my personality. So many people I know, their entire personality. I still am on group texts that are basically solely dedicated to the wider heated rivalry content universe.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not waning. And so I think, we did two episodes over on Rich Text, which you should go check out if you haven't, which touched on the beginning of the season and then the end of the season. And the more that time moved on, I think we were just thinking about the fact that this feels like a much bigger conversation. And specifically, this show has so much to say about the world of romance, media, and narrative. And that's really what this podcast, Love to See It, is about. And so it just felt only right that we should also touch on heated rivalry over here.
100%. I'm very excited to get back into this show. But first, a little housekeeping. Over on Rich Text, in addition to those heated rivalry episodes we mentioned, we more recently talked about the Ashley Teasdale mom group drama, our thoughts on podcasting at the Golden Globes, and Love is Blind Germany. So you can find all of those episodes at claireandemma.substack.com.
Okay. Okay. It's a holiday Monday, Claire. We're here, we're taping, and we're ready to talk about heated rivalry and how this little Canadian show has just taken over the world.
It feels so beautiful to me that at this moment, given everything that's kind of going on
Given looks around.
politically,
Yeah.
like geopolitically, that a huge proportion of like American audiences are just like, we love Canadian entertainment about gay men. Like, that's actually the future we want to see in the world. Canadian dominance,
I mean, I
more
look,
queer sex.
I think this is just greater evidence that like the very loud and violent and dark MAGA group and the current administration is not indicative of all of the American public as a whole, you
Yeah, the
know?
vibe shift was not real, okay? Vibe shift dead on arrival. Vibe shift didn't happen. The vibe has already shifted back with a vengeance.
I assume that many people listening are aware of what heated rivalry is or have already watched the show, maybe like me, more than once all the way through. But in case you haven't, Heated Rivalry is a 6-episode television show created by Jacob Tierney, who is an actor and producer and showrunner and writer, in partnership with the Canadian network Crave. The rights to streaming in the United States were then picked up by HBO. And so that is kind of why the show was able to really break through with American audiences and in American media. And now HBO and HBO or HBO Max, whatever the fuck the network is called now, is really trading on the success, even though, just want to point out, they had no creative hand in it.
Yes, that they were willing for us to see
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
thank you so much. Yeah, and again, if you are not familiar with the show itself, it's basically a love story between two top NHL players in the show. It's called MLH, Major League Hockey. Instead of the Stanley Cup, they have the MLH Cup. All the teams have these absurd sounding names like the Admirals. Please, that's not a real NHL team. Um, and they are kind of like the two hot young stars in the league. One of them is Canadian named Shane Hollander. He is I believe Japanese and white biracial young Canadian star, and Ilya Rozanov is an up-and-coming Russian star. They play for the Montreal Metros and the Boston Raiders, respectively. These teams are rivals, and so there's another taboo on them even being friends. Their rivalry is really played up by the media, by their teammates, but secretly, ever since the first time they met, when they were like not even in their rookie season yet, because they meet up at different kind of international competitions and showcases as well, they have been secretly hooking up.
And that situationship over the course of these 6 episodes blossoms into a full on love story. And that is kind of the journey that we are on with them. And of course, this relationship is being built largely in private while they are grappling with the larger structures of their careers and their families that make it very, very difficult to put that relationship out in the sunlight. Ilya has identified as bisexual for a while, we learn, but he is from Russia, and there is a lot of very institutionalized homophobia in Russia. So his position is, I really can't be in a gay relationship because I won't be able to return home. His family also would not be supportive. Shane has very loving parents that he is quite close to, but he feels the weight of his responsibilities as like a top hockey star. He feels the weight of all of the brand deals that his momager mother has negotiated for him. And he is someone who, over the course of these episodes, we see finally come to terms with the fact that he is gay. That is not an identity that he felt comfortable with when we first meet him when he is like 18. And so they are on these like different but parallel journeys, and that is all explored through the lens of their relationship. There is also a secondary relationship that we see between an older hockey player, Scott Hunter, who becomes involved with a guy who makes smoothies and is also getting his master's degree.
Yeah, we
Kip.
know that he also loves art history because he's always holding a book that says art history. He has like 5 books that say art history
Look, they
on
got
the
a speed
front.
run through that through that
I'm
love
like,
story. It's like all in one episode.
you couldn't find different things that would indicate that it was art history without just saying art
Claire, it's
history.
art history. And they also had a very shoestring budget. So I'm going to give
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one
yeah.
to Jacob Tierney. He was like, we can afford to buy exactly one art history book. So those are the basic contours of the show. And yeah, let's now get into why so many of us have gone absolutely wild for it.
Let's talk about the success of Heated Rivalry and what it kind of shows us, not just about how we feel about Canadians, which is
Which we
positive,
love. We love them.
but also because its audience is predominantly female. The books were written originally by a woman named Rachel Reed. A big part of the conversation has been like, what does Heated Rivalry show us about what women want? And like, obviously, I don't think that is like the most important thing about a queer love story breaking through. Yet we are women. And so that is going to be the lens that we're going to approach this through. There are a lot of gay men making amazing content and writing incredible pieces about Heated Rivalry. We're going to reference some of them. But that's the perspective we're bringing. And a lot of women have been getting way into the show and talking about it from that perspective. So we're going to do that.
Yes. And a lot of women are, women tend to be the biggest consumers of romance media writ large. So it is not, I think, surprising to us that women of all sexual identities are into this show.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it wasn't surprising. I think that there are people with different levels of awareness of kind of the history of women, and not just straight women, like queer women and straight women being interested in love stories written about gay men. I was pretty into the world of fan fiction in high school. So from a pretty
There's a
young
lot of
age,
that.
I was aware, like, you come up in the Harry Potter fan fiction world and like, it actually was never my thing. I was very like vanilla Ron Hermione fanfic. Don't come at me. That was my thing. But like some of the most popular ships were going to be Draco and Harry, Sirius and Remus, and these stories were almost all written by women. So there's this huge world of fan fiction in which women predominantly are writing stories predominantly for women to read about characters who are men falling in love with each other.
Did you see that SNL just did a Harry Potter heated rivalry mashup
I didn't,
sketch?
but that feels like something I could have pitched.
Yeah,
That feels so millennial to
it's
pitch.
Ron and Hermione. I mean, sorry, it's Ron and Harry.
Oh, that's actually not one of the more popular
Yeah, no,
slash
Draco
pairings.
actually makes more sense to me on
Plus, it's
instinct,
a
but
rivalry.
right.
Yeah. No, that is Draco and Harry is sort of like dark heated
Yeah.
rivalry. What if one of them was actually evil? Yeah, no, that does feel like something that a millennial writer pitched to me because, of course, if you ever dipped into the Harry Potter fan fiction universe, you saw the popularity of slash fic, as it was called. And I mean, there is a part of this that feels just kind of like duh to me. Like straight men think that it's hot for two women to have sex, famously. And women who are attracted to men often also think that it's very hot for two men to get it on. It's like there's two people that I think are hot. They're kissing. What's not to like
It's
about
like
that?
double the hot.
Yeah, like, I don't wanna fully overcomplicate this, like, that is a huge element here, right? It's like, yeah, double the hot. Of course I like it. And also just there's the fact that, like, while we talk about men loving lesbian porn and women, we know from studies, are also huge consumers of gay male porn,
And
um,
lesbian porn.
and lesbian porn, um, but they're more disproportionately than men consumers of romance content. And so if women are interested in two hot men getting it on, they're going to be interested in novels about two men falling in love and getting it on.
And TV
Like,
shows.
yeah, it's just simple arithmetic here. Like, thing I like plus thing I like equals thing I like even more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like there's a very basic part of this that is the most obvious thing in the world. Why it's taken so long for people who produce this kind of media to get on board with this is I think there's an assumption that women are not really um, capable of that kind of desire, that our desire is receptive, that it's responsive to male desire, that a woman needs to be involved for us to think ourselves into the scene, whereas men can simply watch a scene of women they find hot and they are comfortable with that being enough involvement for them.
I also think that there is an element of also straight male sexuality that assumes an objectification of women. And so two women together are still just two objects that are there for them and their
Mhm.
consumption, right? And I'm not saying that's how all straight men view queer women, but I think that there is like an assumed piece of that where like any female sexuality is a performance for me.
100%. Like, it's not framed in this, "Oh, how beautiful these 2 women are falling in love,
Right.
and they're so desperate for each other." It's like, "Oh, that's so hot that they're doing that so I can watch." That's
Exactly.
the paradigm, right? And that's not to say also that there's none of that kind of fetishization or objectification when women also are enjoying watching 2 hot men making out, but this investment in the romantic narratives between them, it's really not about them performing for the female gaze in the same way, because it is about their feelings for each other, which are explored in depth, right, in these stories. Like heated rivalry is so much about the feelings that these two men are exploring together. It's not just about them hooking up. But I feel like it's interesting that this tends to accrue around stories involving two men rather than stories about two women falling in love. And one thing that really struck me as I was telling Greg about heated rivalry, one of many conversations where I was telling Greg about heated rivalry, he was like, "Oh, it's sort of like the American and Canadian women's hockey teams. Like the captains keep marrying each other."
Oh, yeah, I've seen these stories floating all around my Instagram feed.
I was like, wait, this is the real heated rivalry. And in fact, women's professional sports are full of this. Like the WNBA is also like riddled with marriages between teammates and rivals. And that is not something that is given a lot of cultural attention. But the idea of two gay men who are hockey rivals falling in love is holds people wrapped. And part of that is like clearly the taboo and the homophobia that professional sports leagues for men are riddled with.
And I read a few like Instagram
Yeah.
essays, for lack of a better word, from a few like retired hockey players who are out, and
Mhm.
grappling with their own feelings about the show and the complexities of it. At least the accounts that I've seen spoke to like a pretty deep and rancid homophobia that they have felt in professional hockey league.
So that all creates this like taboo that I also know Rachel Reed has spoken about the fact that that was a motivation for her and even coming up with the concept of heated rivalry, which is that she was just thinking a lot about how sad it was that if you were a gay player in the NHL, you could never come out because of how vicious the homophobia is. And she wanted to write kind of a fairy tale, like a story of someone who was able to come out and have that love and have it in public and also have success, and that's how she ended up starting writing Game Changers, which features, Scott Hunter and Kip, the smoothie king,
I love them.
smoothie king of New York.
Episode 3 is one of my favorite episodes in
Oh, it's
the
so
first
good.
season. I love them so much.
Yeah, and, like, that that makes a lot of sense. A taboo is sort of a romantic staple because that is what gives friction to the love story.
And we've talked a
Um
lot about that when it comes to like really classic romance literature and films, like anything Jane Austen, right? You are intrigued in part because you are seeing two people navigate these cultural institutions that they cannot necessarily navigate super freely. And part of that is like watching that creates like an inherent interest and tension.
Yeah. I also do wonder sometimes if there is a bit of a darker side to some of this, which is I think that women are just like men are also kind of taught from a very young age that men's stories are more interesting and worthwhile and that men are the main characters of the universe, right? And I think women mostly still like men, despite heteropessimism as the ideology of our time. Women are still, overall, as a group, interested in men, care about their stories, and like them. And we're used to paying more attention to that than to our own stories. I do think that that is probably also an element here
Mhm.
that like that it's easy to invest in their stories because we think of men as people whose stories are worth investing in and that isn't always given to female characters.
Though lest we not forget, Hunting Wives took off on Netflix quite
And that's
recently.
listen, there is an appeal and I would love to see more Hunting Wives. Like let's push even past Hunting Wives. The gay
No,
sex
I
wasn't
yeah.
enough of a focus of the Hunting Wives.
More in season 2, please, Malin Ackerman and Brittany Snow. But
Yeah.
yes, no, I would love to see more sapphic stories get this kind of attention. I did read that Crave is coming out with a softball show, Slow Pitch, produced by Elliot Page. And I do wonder if that show will get a bit of a boost because of the Heated Rivalry obsession. Crave is the Canadian network that produced Heated Rivalry.
I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, I have heard it's like less sexy, more like mockumentary style, but I still think that it could kind of trade on some of that excitement about queer sports romances.
That listen, I don't need a romance to be quite as graphic as Heated Rivalry to really let it take over my personality. I watched All the Boys I Loved Before, like, I think 100 times when it came out,
So
so,
true. No, I
uh,
personally am ready to watch Slow Pitch, so bring it on.
I think another important part of the conversation has been by taking women out of the scene, there's no, proxy for you in the scene. You don't have to consider, like, what would it feel like to be this woman in this moment? How should she be behaving? Should I behave more like her in my sex life? You know, all those anxieties that can be brought up about sex and desire for women. For a lot of women who watch the show, they've talked about how that's kind of taken off the table by having 2 men being the ones exploring this love story.
Right. You don't have to automatically slot yourself into one role or the other. Instead, you can take pieces of the narrative and relate to it. And I think we spoke about this in the very first episode that we did about the show, but we talked about the fact that historically, pretty much everyone who is not like a cis straight white man has been forced to learn how to find pieces of themselves in narratives that aren't necessarily explicitly about them. So I think that most women inherently know how to do this, are comfortable doing this, and there is like a safety to seeing a story in which the dynamics of the patriarchy are not present in the romance.
Yeah, they've been, like, surgically removed. It's like, we
Right.
don't have to worry about those, like, that doesn't exist in this world, and even the women who are in heated rivalry, they're not showing up in the kinds of roles and personalities and tropes that I think I've been accustomed to see women slotted into. They're shown, I think, as very human and as, like, positive figures overall, but flawed sometimes, but in more complex ways, and
They are supporting roles with agency.
100%. And then within the heart of these stories, they're not even there. Like that this isn't our space to worry about how we're being perceived. And it's not just about, removing a woman from the picture. It's also about removing the limitations of femininity, right? Like there was a really insightful quote from Guy Mark Foster, who's a professor of 20th century American literature at Bowdoin, in this Hollywood Reporter piece about kind of the phenomenon of heated rivalry and female fandom. And he was talking about how a lot of women are kind of limited in how they feel they can explore their own masculine sides.
Mm.
And, a lot of women who are interested in slash fic are queer or they had some other pull towards tomboyishness or something. And there is an expectation that you will kind of hew to heteronormative ways of being, that you will hew towards traditional femininity. And so you end up sort of leaving those parts of yourself behind. And he said a lot of women writers of slash romances have admitted to having been tomboys in their earlier life. When women are mandated to give up being a tomboy as they mature, these books allow women a means to explore a suppressed male identity.
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, I feel like in general, something about heated rivalry has allowed a lot of women just a feeling of expansiveness, right? Like, I think so much about patriarchy and specifically the way that patriarchal structures show up in romantic relationships is about limitation, is about putting someone in a box, is about playing a role that is prescribed or figuring out the best ways that you and your partner, if you are in a straight relationship, can push up against those prescribed roles. Like we are always inherently reacting to them because we all grew up in a society that is governed by a lot of these rules, whether we like them or not. You can have the most like equal relationship. You can have a partner who is so invested in pushing back on those things, and yet you are still in conversation with them. And so I
Yeah.
think there is like a freedom in viewing a show or viewing a romance and putting yourself into it or even just observing it and and feeling that vision of what love can be or what sex can be expand. It feels like freedom.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating given that we're in this moment when what we're often hearing, and we're gonna get more into the implications for reality TV and romance TV, um, for this show's success, but, like, we hear a lot these days about how women are so frustrated to always have to be in their masculine and, like, if only I could find a man where I can always be in my feminine, but the reality is that for lots of women, they are having to suppress their masculine sides from a very young age, and there is so much freedom in being allowed to explore what those
Yeah.
masculine elements could add to their lives, and the idea of doing it through this kind of story means doing it without, like, having to admit to anything or push back against anything, without having to be like, maybe I'm an unnatural woman. Maybe I'm a woman who wants to be in charge sometimes, or I'm a woman who is interested in taking on some roles or activities or affects that are preserved for men. It's okay for me to be interested in embodying this because it's through a man. And I think that that is clearly something that there's gonna be even more need for as we're pushing back on allowing women as a society to pursue those things in their own lives as women.
Absolutely. I think on that note, it's a great moment to take a break. When we get back, we will get more into what draws women to this show and also what the world of romance media and specifically reality dating shows can learn from the success of Heated Rivalry.
And we're back. So, one thing that I know we've been discussing culturally because of the response to the show and that we've been thinking about is like, what does this show us about the masculinity that women crave? And this is something that male influencers have been trying to nail down. It's like, do women crave masculinity
Andrew
that's
Tate.
like Andrew Tate? Do they crave masculinity that's a little bit more like Tim Walz? Like, what kind of masculinity are women looking for? And I think that it's pretty clear that women are going absolutely crazy for the masculinity shown in Heated Rivalry.
You mean
S
hot and safe?
Yeah, I'm like, they just want men to be hot and safe, come on. It's so simple. Like, it really is, and, like, as a mother of sons right now, you do find yourself wondering, like, I what is a positive vision of masculinity that I can give my sons that isn't about hoarding certain positive characteristics for boys that girls aren't allowed to have access to, but that also doesn't feel like fearful
Mm.
of self-expression or policing all of their urges, in an unhealthy way? Like, how do we let them, explore their identities as boys in a healthy way? And so one thing that really strikes me about this romance is that Shane and Ilya both embody a masculinity that is very traditionally masculine coded.
Yeah.
It's like they're into sports. They like to give each other shit. Shane wears joggers literally everywhere and he doesn't know what else to do.
This is why he has to hire a stylist eventually, and I support him.
Like they're just bros. And a lot of women who are attracted to men are into bros. Like, that's fine. Like, I
Sadly,
feel like
it's
that's one of the
true.
takeaways here.
But yeah, it is really like a self-assured, secure masculinity. It is not shying away from those tenets of traditional masculinity, but it also because of its security, it's not hanging on to the pieces of masculinity that require dominance over other human beings.
Exactly. It's like who I am as a man is enough. It's not I don't need to show that by exerting some kind of, like, control or violence over someone else. They're also not, like, neurotic about it in any way. Like, they're not like, "Is it okay that I'm just a bro? Is it okay that I'm the way I am?" They feel good about who they are. They're at the top of their field. They're ripped hockey players who love video games, and they're like, "I'm great at this, and this rocks." It kinda reminds me of, like, something like a bit of a meme I've seen more and more on social media that's just, like, bros being bros and being like, "Dudes rock," and, like, because it's just being sorta like, it's okay for us to just be, like, simple bros who are like, "This is cool."
I think
That's a
that
healthy vision of masculinity in a sense.
and I think what you're speaking to is also the same reason that people have gone absolutely wild for the hockey podcasts hosted by straight men that have treated Heated Rivalry with reverence and enthusiasm. You know, I'm thinking about like Empty Netters, which I've seen clips
Mhm.
of like all over my social media feed. And it is just these like sports loving hockey bros getting so fucking into Heated Rivalry, like dissecting every episode. They started having cast members on and like Jacob Tierney to interview. And they're just so genuinely enthusiastic about it. And there's no piece of their commentary that feels timid or feels like, oh, we have to qualify Like, we have to be, insecure about our identity as men, or specifically as straight men, in order to, like, get excited about this beautifully queer hockey
Yeah.
show.
I'm not gonna be afraid that this is going to, like, taint me in some
Yeah, there's no like,
way.
"Bro, is this gay?"
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I saw a really cute TikTok the other day of a guy who was like, dating apps aren't working for me, so I'm taking smoothies to my local, like, hockey rink, and he shows up, and there's, like, one straight guy practicing on the ice, and he's like, "I don't want a smoothie, but I have the ice. You should come skate." And then he, like, teaches him to do, like, slap shots at the net, and it's so
That's so,
wholesome, and I was
so
like, "I don't care
pure.
if this is all a skit. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed." But, like, that I think is, like, at the heart of what a lot of women are responding to about this. It's like, I want a man who can coexist with these men as bros, right? Like, they should all be able to be bros together in a secure and confident way, and not have that anxiety about, like, proving that they are more of a man because of who they have sex with or how they have sex or, like, these exploitative status markers. And this is something that, like, the Andrew Tate model of masculinity and even a lot of healthier visions, healthier, quote unquote, visions of what a man should be end up relying on, which is like, well, men should do these good things because then they'll get laid. Like,
Right, like, the actual measure of one's secure masculinity is how many ladies can you bag?
right. Exactly. And like fundamentally, that all goes back to this very toxic, heteronormative, patriarchal view of gender relations, which is that like status is shown through acquiring women, whether that's through like sex trafficking them, as Andrew Tate has allegedly
Oh,
been,
Jesus.
doing. That there is a model that is incredibly overtly toxic. That's like, I get bitches, I get hoes because I'm so successful, because I'm so dominant. They want me to treat them like shit. Or is it this vision that's like, well, I'm just a nice guy and I go to yoga and that's how I get laid all the time? It always comes back to like needing to rack up women as conquests in order to prove that you're the most successful and admirable and high status man.
And there's nothing more actually insidious to straight women than imagining that the men that you are out here interacting with, dating, partnering with, are performing kindness or performing certain qualities purely as a way of like gaining access to your sexuality or gaining power over you. Right? Like, there's a reason that I think there are so many memes about, like, the performative male or the capital N nice guy or, like, the male feminist, right? It's not actually that women don't wanna meet men who care about feminism and are allies or are, like, reading at a bar or whatever. It's that there is a fear that those qualities are conditional and, like, are only about gaining access to women and that they're not actually rooted in these men's sense of self. And so you will end up with someone who is actually faking all of these great qualities that you were drawn to.
100%. Like, it's contingent on you responding by giving them what they want, or it will be taken away. And that's been a big part of like the, oh, we need healthy masculinity discourse, as well as the Andrew Tate thread, which is like, women aren't giving us what we want anymore. They're not marrying us enough. They're not sleeping with us enough. They're not giving us enough male heirs or whatever. Like, what can we do to get that stuff from them? And if it's not forthcoming, we end up with something like the incel movement. Like, men can turn violent or insecure when they have this conception that women giving them sex or commitment is the reward for them being a good enough man. Well, what if they can't get it? Who's withholding that from them? Who is going to become the target of their ire? And in this moment when, like, a lot of women were still, like, looking at the incel movement, honestly, like, more powerful than ever before, like, a lot of, inroads into the dominant political ideology and the government. There's a lot of sway being held by these men who think that women owe sex to men, and if they withhold it, that it takes away men's like male identity, and so it needs to be like given to them in order to like maintain healthy masculinity. I think that seeing a show like Heated Rivalry is like there's something so soothing about seeing men be enough for each other. It's
Mm,
like the care and love that we have for each other is enough. Like, we don't need to get something from you. You don't need to feel a certain way about us for us to be whole as men. And I think that is really beautiful to see in this moment and, like, hopeful in a certain sense. Obviously,
yeah.
it's a very specific story, but, like, it is a beautiful, hopeful thing, and, Adrian Daub, who, he co-hosts In Bed with the Right with Maura Donegan and is a professor at Stanford, and he talked a little bit about it with Julie Carey Wong, for The Guardian, which is a great deep dive into this. He pointed out that the show, he says, seems to go out of its way to say that it's very masculine to be gay. And he was talking about sort of the history of these sort of romances, which are not new at all, which kind of also have reveled in this idea that homosexuality, he says, is a natural overflow of masculine energy. And he says it's a vision of a sort of non-toxic but also non-anxious masculinity, masculinity that doesn't require women to constantly affirm it. And I think that for a long time that has been liberating for women who have been used in this way as sort of like notches on the bedpost, as trophies, to be able to appreciate the masculinity of a man without feeling like he's going to like need to harm you in order to maintain that status and that self-image.
Yeah, wow, that last line, masculinity that doesn't require women to constantly affirm it. That really like hits.
It's beautiful. I was reading the think piece about this, and I was like, "Man, people are so smart about Heated Rivalry." So many important thoughts. And, like, in Shane and Ilya, we really do see them, like, hanging out just, like, the way that I feel like I would see Greg hanging out with one of his friends, just, like, playing video
Exactly the
games
way
together.
Greg hangs out with
Like,
his
when they're at the
friends.
cottage or, they're just, like, hanging out, like, "Let's play video games. Let's kick the soccer ball around together. Let's, like, give each other shit," you know?
And then fuck.
And then fuck. That's like it's the circle is completed. They have all they need.
Truly.
But also, like, it's not about disdain for women or women being rejected. They both have women close to them that they really respect and love, and who are positive figures in their life. And then Shane's mother is more sort of a complicated figure, someone he needs to make peace with because she's placed a huge amount of pressure on him, um, to be the driver of the whole family as kind of economic engine. She has sort of built her life around managing the part of his career that is like brand deals and sponsorships, right? And if
She's a
he were to blow up
momager.
that part of his career, like he might still play hockey, but will she be able to get him deals with luxury watchmakers? Then he would be letting her down, right? And so that's something that they have to resolve at the end. She has to sort of ask his forgiveness for having put that pressure on him and made him feel like he couldn't come out to her before. But they also both have these female friends who are very interesting figures in their life. Ilya has a sort of friends with benefits, Svetlana, who is also sort of a figure who's like very interested in hockey. Like she's kind of a guy's girl. Like they hook up. It doesn't hurt her feelings. So we also see in Svetlana, I think, a woman who is sort of exploring those kind of masculine coded parts of identity that women don't always feel they have access to, which I think is really cool and something I enjoyed about Ilya's storyline. He really respects her and like sees her as an equal. She's just not the person that he falls in love with.
She's also essentially by the end like his only family member.
Yeah, his family is toxic.
Yes, his mother died when he was quite young, and we learn more about that as the season continues. His father passes away over the course of the season, but he had a very complex relationship with him. And his brother is quite like emotionally abusive and depends on him largely for financial support. So like these are not familial relationships in which he receives care back. And Svetlana, who he has known since he was quite young, is that person. She's also a piece of home in Boston. She is Russian. They can speak Russian to each other. They have a shared cultural history, a shared sense of, childhood. And yes, they have a sexual element to their relationship, but it is ultimately as equals. And we see there's like a great moment where she intimates to him that she's aware of his relationship with Shane, who is in his phone as Jane. She says, the way it is between us, like it's not the same as it is with Jane. And I hope he knows how lucky he is.
Mm.
Like, she is an autonomous figure. She is a person with agency. She is a person who has a really mutual, equal, respectful relationship with Ilya. And we see elements of that same dynamic with Shane and this actress, Rose Landry, that he dates later into the season, who is a big part of him coming out to himself and continues to then be a really important presence in his life after they end the romantic piece of their relationship.
Yeah. She's sort of from the other side, someone who grew up in theater. She's like 70, 80% of my boyfriends have turned out to be gay. So she's sort of, I think, helping Shane kind of get in touch with this side of himself, like the feminine, maybe coded side of himself that men are expected to repress, to be able to admit to her, like, I kind of like to be the bottom. Like he says, like, I like to be the hole, not the peg. Like, and
And she's like, hell yeah.
yeah, he grew up in this hockey world where that was not, those things are not something you're allowed to even really let enter your mind. Whereas she grew up in a world that is much more
Fluid.
dominated by feminine energy and fluidity. And like he needs to sort of explore that side of himself. And she, in this very loving and open way, like helps guide him into that as he's on his own sort of journey of discovery. And so I really loved both of those friendships. Um, and I loved this vision of masculinity that they kind of help fill out.
Me too.
So, what does this show us about the relationships that women want?
Equality, baby.
Oh, women will not stop shouting, screaming, pounding the table for equality in our relationships.
I think that
We're like, please stop giving me billionaires who have more money than me to control me and my reproductive rights.
yeah, you're like, we're over the 50 Shades of Grey / Twilight model.
Yes. I think it is so fascinating the cultural moment that this is arriving at, as compared to the last like 2 decades. Julie Carey Wong's piece in The Guardian also gets into this in a smart way, but we have had these decades of romance crazes about a man of higher status somehow like rescuing and providing for a weaker or lower status woman. We've got Twilight, where he's like an immortal vampire who's also, I think, sort of like wealthy because vampires are just like resourced. I don't know.
And
It's very,
old.
I didn't read Twilight. Very old, like way older than her, and will never age. 50 Shades, which is actually like originally was Twilight fan fiction. So
Correct.
he is mortal, but he is an older billionaire who falls
He's
in love with like
vampiric in
a
other
penniless
ways.
college student. Yes, extremely. And then he kind of like gives her the life that she wants. He drops her into the career that she wants, everything. She just has to like do his weird sex stuff that it turns out she loves conveniently, because then she still gets to have all the stuff he can give her, right? Bridgerton is another example she points to. A little bit more complicated because the women typically in those books also have the same high social status. They're also aristocrats, but women inherently had way less status and power in every society at that time. Still, but like especially in that era. So we're
Right.
still seeing that power dynamic where the young aristocratic woman needs like a duke to marry her. Whereas he could just be a single duke forever and the bloodline could end with him and that would be fine. So the power dynamic is all about like being rescued by a more powerful man.
And I do think Bridgerton, obviously, as you said, is like a more complex example of this than some of these other stories. And there is like, I think are a lot of valid reasons that women are quite drawn to stories like Bridgerton. I think we've drawn comparisons between Bridgerton and Heated Rivalry also because it's one of the few current romance series that puts like sex and desire in the physical sense kind of front and center. Not a lot of shows do that. And yet, yeah, Bridgerton is inherently playing within these like very strict patriarchal structures. Like that is part of the appeal.
Yeah, like, and that's actually, I not a Twilight or 50 Shades person, but that is kind of a genre of romance that has just traditionally interested me more, which is like
Same.
how, like, it's almost like a fairy tale of what if this extremely unequal power structure that we're locked into, what if it worked out the best possible way? And like, what if the heroine gets everything that she wants and dreams, even though the world around her is all militating against her happiness, right? And she finds the man who is going to be her ticket to this little bubble of freedom and
And also he
fulfillment.
loves her.
He loves her and he's going to do whatever she needs to make her life good. And I do think that part of this was about the cultural moment that we were in also, that these were such dominant stories. Like, we're talking about an era when feminism had made a lot of huge strides and women were working. We were being told, like, you can have it all, like, girls can do anything. And yet, a lot of women still weren't happy and still were feeling frustrated and stymied by the failures of capitalism, by the feminist girl boss dream not looking quite as glossy as we thought it would be when we first imagined it. You know, you're like looking around, you're like, having a job is so hard, it's so thankless. Most women are not going to be girl bosses. We're just going to have jobs, and those jobs will not pay enough, and they won't give enough maternity leave.
And
Why
often
can't I
it
just
means doing double duty, right? Just take, instead of,
exactly.
yes, we've entered the workforce, but we still have all of like the domestic tasks
And isn't
laid
it,
at
in a
our
way,
feet.
easier to imagine getting rescued by a billionaire who can pay for everything, for all the friction to be removed from your life, than it is to imagine marrying someone who will be a truly equal partner in managing the life that you're building together? Like, what if he were just so rich that he could pay for a cleaning service so that I didn't have to do all the cleaning after I put our kids to bed, right? And we're not in that era anymore. Like, not that those problems have been fixed, but like the
No, we just
feminist
gone
gains
backwards.
are being rolled back. And like, yeah, like we're in a moment where I think the reinstantiation of like really systemically enforced inequality is very real. It never fully went away, but more and more policies are being put into place, more and more like cultural pushback is happening to make it even harder for women to actually have that kind of equality and independence. That wasn't enough maybe for happiness, but it was better than bleeding out in a parking lot because you can't get an abortion. It's better than, being subject to financial abuse because you're a stay-at-home wife and your husband has decided that he wants to exert control over your every move. And so maybe there's a different dream that is becoming more alluring, of having actual equality and empowerment within your relationship, or so I would like to think.
Yeah, I think the bleakness of the moment makes us even more desperate to envision a better future.
Yeah, and like what if it wasn't just he's a billionaire who's going to rescue me? What if we're both billionaires?
Mom, I am the rich man, as Cher would say. But yeah, what if that dynamic was removed altogether, right? What if,
Yes.
we in Shane and Ilya, we have this dream of these two people who have a shared passion, who are at the top of their game, who are successful in their own right and are navigating a relationship on those terms and are able also to have these really thoughtful, naughty, emotional conversations, especially as time goes on. Their relationship, I think, is less grounded in the emotional initially. We see that evolution. And I think to a lot of women, like certainly to me, that is hot.
Yes.
That is the dream. Like that is just like a beautiful thing to watch. And I think feels especially like something we're reaching for in a moment where everything kind of seems to be falling apart and moving backwards around us.
I completely agree. And something I noted in a lot of just responses from everyday viewers of the show who are women is that they'd feel hopeless about having a relationship that's fully equal, because even if you have a relationship that strives for equality, the context is just militating against it. But they crave that. They want to imagine having a relationship that is completely equal and that really leaves room for our own excellence, our own thriving. And that's something that a lot of like people on the other side of the divide right now don't want. You know, they want women to feel like they should be marrying up and for men to be the star of the marriage and for women to be the support behind the scenes. And unfortunately, as women have jobs and are good at stuff, like that's just not going to be the model for marriage for most women anymore. But we want to be in relationships that aren't about sacrificing our own dreams, that aren't about being the supporting partner. Shane and Ilya have that give and take. They're like, we're going to figure out our careers side by side and not with the
Yeah.
assumption that one of us is obviously just going to have to. One thing that I'm interested to see, 'cause I haven't read all the books, but I noticed they dropped little hints of like Shane watching Ilya with kids in a kind of dreamy way. And I was like, I love the idea of even thinking about them like dreaming about having a family and what that would look like, because that could be such a wide open question for them to plan in a way that for men and women in relationships together, often there are just a lot of damaging assumptions built into how that's going to look.
Absolutely. Something to consider in the apparently at least 3 seasons that we are getting.
Mm.
Rachel Reed is hard at work on the 3rd Shane and Ilya book, I think,
She's the
as we
George R. R.
speak.
Martin of our time.
Yeah, my God, the pressure this woman must be feeling. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, the rest of our conversation about heated rivalry.
And we're back. One last thing I wanted to talk about before we get into like what dating shows and romance shows could learn from this success is consent. We
Yes.
have to talk about this.
Ilya is a consent king. Ilya is out here asking for consent all the time in a way that is so like seamless and sexy. You hardly even notice it, but it's there.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a vibe killer. It doesn't have to be stilted. You don't have to be like, is it okay if I kiss you right now? You can still check in. It can be hot
And it
to
can be like
ask if you're enjoying something.
in the middle of like,
Yeah. Inviting
yeah,
his
I
friends.
think that so much of what we have seen modeled in straight relationships in media is this almost like the music goes out and it's like, take a pause, step away from each other, look at the woman. Would it be okay if I ever touched you?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, well, yeah, you're right. That is kind of not sexy. So is the problem, like, are we supposed to take
The
away from that,
problem
that
is
like
consent.
consent, right? So consent isn't sexy. Well, guess there's no choice then to just like barrel on through without checking in. No, heated rivalry shows us a model of how consent can be truly integrated into the romance, into the sexiness.
Well, it's like consent is connection, right? Like, is it really so onerous or antithetical to passion to be like really like looking at each other and being like, do you like that? Like to be really checking in throughout is to be connected. And
Yeah, or
that's
just like
what sex
staring at
is
someone and being
about.
like, can I fuck you now? It's like,
Like, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
yes,
you
that is
can.
also consent. Like, inviting someone in is also a way of managing consent. Like, and so we see ways in which, like, Shane and Ilya both play their part in managing that connection so that they're on the same page throughout these encounters. Even when sometimes things are a little boundary pushing or like Ilya is being a little dominating and Shane is like, I think I love this, but do I? Like, that can be sexy to have a little bit of that power play. But that doesn't mean that you have to abandon the part where you make sure that everyone is having a good time.
Right. Exactly.
Sometimes, yeah, we see this show up in like Bachelor shows where it's like the guy makes the mistake of being like, I would like to kiss you. Can I do that now? And it's like everything comes to a screeching halt. And the Bachelorette's like, oh, that was such a turnoff when he said that. We have to, like, skill issue, basically.
Right,
This is
yeah,
a
no,
skill
you're right. You're
issue.
like, this is that's so true. It is a skill issue. It's like you just didn't stick the landing there. It wasn't the
Yeah.
idea behind this was good. Your execution just faltered a little bit.
Yeah. Like, we need to study this like game tape. Like, how can we introduce conversations about consent into our personal lives in a way that doesn't make things awkward and weird? Personally, I'm learning a lot. As a longtime romance reader, like, the line around consent is something that has often been kind of like flirted with and played with. And I think for women, these kind of non consensual fantasies or borderline fantasies are, like, often alarming to read now. Like, the trends have moved away from that, aside from dark romance. It used to be very, like, mainstream romance. There would be a lot of, like, really graphic assault plots, and then they would fall in love. Um,
Yeah.
and that hasn't completely gone away. I mean, look at Colleen Hoover novels, um
I'd rather not.
but, like, that is a way, I think, for women to also do what they're doing through heated rivalry in a different way, which is to fantasize about their sexual desires without having to admit to wanting those things for themselves, without any, like, fear of judgment for showing sexual agency or sexual desire, needing to, like, overcome that social conditioning. And I think that, like, there is almost like a remedial level of, like, we need to, as a society, come so far from a place where women feel like it's so wrong for them to have their own sexual desires that they need to fantasize about someone just doing that to them without them ever saying that it was even okay. And, like, just hopefully the right guy does it in the right way, because God forbid they express that themselves. That would be so, inappropriate for a woman to do. We have to move a long way from that to, like, how do we have enthusiastic, mutual, sexy consent within these encounters? Like, this to me is just watching this, I was like, this is like light years ahead of what I would see in most romance media about women and men.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue into the next and final piece of our conversation, which is what could heteronormative dating shows like The Bachelor learn from heated rivalry? Like, what does the audience want? I think we've seen reality dating shows try a lot of different things, especially a franchise like The Bachelor that has just been around for a really long time and has seemed to kind of be like losing its juice.
Yeah.
What do audiences actually want to see reflected in our reality television?
I mean, this might seem too literal, but I think we can't skip over this. More queer dating shows. Like,
The Ultimatum Queer Love is one of the greatest reality dating shows of all time. I will stand by that. It's so dramatic, and
it was so
I'm
dramatic.
so mad that it was canceled. I'm like, I'm sorry. Outside of like season 1 of the Straight Ultimatum, fucking snooze fest.
Yeah, I'm still angry about the cancellation of the Ultimatum Queer Love also, and I think it's interesting because it seemed like it was pretty successful, and in fact, Netflix makes a lot of shows that are not incredibly widely watched, and so it was not hard to feel, as several Ultimatum Queer Love cast members said publicly, that it was a political decision, that, like.
I feel like that's not even a question. I feel like
Yeah,
it was a nod, it was a bending of the knee a little bit to this
yeah.
administration, something that also we've seen a lot of networks, big corporations do in various ways.
Yeah, we're just gonna lean a little bit away from showing queer relationships on screen. We're going to go back to more traditional values. We're gonna greenlight, uh, whatever,
We need
members only Palm
20
Beach,
oh
which
my
I did
god.
start watching, and it's so
Guys,
vile to
it's
realize that they thought people would be excited to hear about what was going on at Mar-a-Lago.
guys, it's so rancid. But I almost wanna do a podcast episode about it because of
Yeah,
how rancid it's like, I don't wanna promote it, but I
right. Don't
also,
watch it.
am deeply fascinated by, like, the level of rancid culture,
It might be our duty to
portrayed into it.
discuss.
Yeah, it might. Let us know if that's something that you guys, would be interested in on here or probably more on Rich Text, but let us know if you'd be interested to hear about that. I think what we can see from a show like that is that, like, there is an inherent kind of, like, shallowness and very obvious constructedness of that entire subculture, and that is not something that I feel watching, like, a queer dating show like The Ultimatum Queer Love. I'm not just sitting there being like, "What are the various rancid pieces that have been put together into like a pastiche to bring me this like horrible cultural product. And
Yeah.
I think people want to see experiences that are outside of their own.
And also a lot of people have parts of these experiences, like the
Right.
ones we
There
see in
are
the
also
ultimatum
queer
queer love.
people that
Right. There
exist.
are a lot of queer people, and queerness exists on, in different ways. Sometimes people are queer and you don't even realize it, like that there
It
are so
happens.
many queer people all around you. But also like I think the experiences of the ultimatum queer love are more relatable to me than Members Only Palm Beach as a
Same.
completely straight woman.
I would certainly have to agree.
And I think that's what a lot of our conversation today has been about is that actually, to a lot of women, straight and queer alike, the experiences of these two gay men characters in Heated Rivalry, and, I'll say Scott, and Kip as well. So the 4 gay men, or queer men that we see falling in love in Heated Rivalry, their experiences are relatable to us in specific ways. I think that also when the industry comes out with queer dating shows, which they should, I think that doing what Jacob Tierney did and consciously being like, "My biggest audience is going to be women," is just smart from a business perspective. And he said, "Gay men will find us. I know they will." And they are like, to me, the core and most crucial audience because this is a love story about their experience that is so rarely told. And that should be done right. And they should be a valued part of that audience. But if you don't think that straight women are going to watch your dating show, then it will probably not last very long because women make up the vast majority of the potential audience for a show like this.
Right.
And they
Women,
will
queer, and
watch
straight
queer dating
alike
shows.
are the core audience for any romance media, and that includes obviously reality dating shows. I don't think anyone would be surprised to learn that women make up the majority of the audience of really any reality show, to be
Right.
honest. Like that is the core of your viewership regardless. And so yeah, thinking about what women actually want to see and also taking those desires seriously, which I think is something that Jacob Tierney really did and has been quite explicit about that. About how he dove into the romance genre, about how he felt that the genre was underserved in large part because the powers that be don't have a lot of care for what women actually desire and don't take those desires seriously from both like a creative and a business perspective. And I think doing that has clearly paid off. Again, this was made on a shoestring budget, shot for 36 days. Like, it's
Yeah.
kind of incredible what you can accomplish when you have a clear vision and when you are taking all of the pieces of your intended audience seriously.
Yes. I completely agree. And another side of that is that, like, I think a lot of what we see on reality dating shows right now is kind of backlash tinged. It's reactionary. Like, we're leaning heavily into storylines about couples embracing gender roles. And, part of that is just that it's in the water. It's the cast is going to have people in it who have these thoughts and feelings. We're hearing so much about people wanting to be in their feminine and wanting a man who's in his
Lord, it's
masculine.
everywhere.
But I don't think that this is a trend that's going to have legs. And I don't think that dating shows should be investing too much in that. I think that if you're looking backward at these sort of fantasy ideas of how men and women used to be, and we need to get back to that, I don't think that that is where the culture is headed. So consider that that bubble might be about to pop. I think we're about to be fatigued with the quest for a guy in finance, 6'5", with blue eyes who can lead his wife and provide. There's a deep unmet desire among a lot of women in your audience for equality and like true equality in relationships.
And I guess that's why I always go back to the quest for a good narrative. should
Yeah.
be at the center of a reality dating show. Like, there are certain just unknowns when it comes
Mhm.
to reality television that you don't have in a scripted series, right? The things that people say are, yes, can be produced, but are in large part dependent on the people that you cast and the situations that they're in and how they happen to react. You can't count on that. What you
Yeah.
can control is telling a great story, telling a story that is anchored in what people come to romance narratives for, which is fantasy, which is complex dynamics, which is an arc that allows you to connect yourself to it in some way. And I think that that is an issue that we've had with a lot of reality dating shows for a long time now. That, like,
Mm.
what we want isn't just drama for the sake of drama, but drama as a means to an end.
Yeah, not just, like, arguments
Suffering.
about shrimp or
Yeah.
just suffering. Yeah, and, like, with Shane and Ilya, as you described earlier, this is a story that isn't about just, like, these sort of tropes of queer romance, like, "I'm terrified to come out," or, like, fear, but they do both go on journeys of self-acceptance and maturation, and I think that some of the best seasons of The Bachelor have included some of that real, like, getting to see a lead come to understand what they want better in a real
Joey.
way. And well, I do keep thinking about Joey as we talk about this because I'm like, do women want to see a man who's like masculine and like sports and is a bro, but like is confident and like self
And
assured
knows
and
how to
doesn't
cry.
knows how to cry and like that doesn't make him feel like insecure and weird and he respects women and sees them as like unique individuals. I'm like, it's all sounding like we should have Joey back. Is there another guy out there like Joey?
Right, Joey, or I think Charity season also had, like, a
Oh,
really incredible arc. She
yeah.
ended up with these 2 great men at the end. She chose the person who was right for her. We felt for everyone involved. They're all still great friends. Like, that was a great story.
Yes, exactly. We had some great love stories, but even like further in the past, when we see like a Jason Mesnick kind of exploring what he really wants in a partner.
And that season was full of friction and drama.
Exactly. Or even I think that's why Sean Lowe's season was also quite popular. It's like
So
I don't think
good.
he knew exactly who he wanted, but he actually worked on figuring it out. So casting is obviously very important. Like casting people who embody qualities that women actually want and not just like the most square-jawed person from the previous season, right? Do they
Oh,
actually embody some
Lord.
of these qualities that women want? Are they open to actually getting to know themselves better? I think a lot of men are not that interested in that, for example. I think that casting is huge, but it also might mean getting creative with some different formats. I would really be interested to see more thought being put into is there a way to do a Bachelor spinoff that is less heteronormative in its structure, that does have that kind of, openness to different ways of being in relationships? I think that the audience is ready for something that feels fresher.
I completely agree, and this is also why I will always miss the original F-Boy Island.
I know.
But yeah, try things. I think that is, like, evidence that not everything's gonna work, but we need
Mm.
to be willing to try things, and I think something that we are seeing in the entertainment industry, specifically in this country, as it has gotten, as with so many industries, more and more and more centralized with fewer decision makers, like, everything is owned by, like, 4 people. I think there is a tendency towards following a formula, towards taking a lot of often wrong lessons, like executives taking the wrong lessons from things that are successful and then just trying to recreate them in a really rote way, rather
Mm.
than having a more expansive vision and letting people try things, accepting the possibility that things might fail, but maybe it's better to, like, give a modest budget to a bunch of different creators and let them try things than to just
Yeah.
give a shit ton of money when you know you have, like, one person with two known entity stars or whatever, or hosts, or, depending on if it's fiction or nonfiction, fiction or reality, and just being like, and do the thing that got a lot of ratings before. Do it
Yeah.
exactly like that.
I'm actually, like, shaking in my boots thinking of some of the Heated Rivalry spinoffs we're gonna see that do
It's
not,
Lord,
replicate the
Lord,
important
the number
parts.
of notes that are just being given that, like, dude, Heated Rivalry. I
Yeah, I
already know.
can't.
I have a lot of friends who are in the entertainment industry, and like, it's already happening.
Well, and, to go back to casting, incredibly cast show, and Jacob Tierney has talked a lot about how important it was to find people to play Ilya and Shane, played by Connor Story and Hudson Williams, who he didn't think were going to be kind of like reluctant about what the role entailed. He was like, it couldn't be like every day we show up and they're like, do we really have to do this? Is sort of what he said in one interview. He's like, there needed to be buy in
Yeah.
and there needed to be chemistry, which is something that
Ah,
we've talked about with
chemistry.
Heated Rivalry, I think on Rich Text. Like the chemistry is like you can feel it at a glance through the screen. Like the first time they see each other, it scorches you. And chemistry between romantic leads is so ill attended to in modern romance.
It's actually
And
appalling.
it's like when you actually, I think, break down a lot of what's on screen with Heated Rivalry, some of it is pretty basic. Some of the dialogue is pretty basic. That chemistry between them and the way that the shots are framed to like make the most of that tension, that's like that's like 80% of the show. Like you need to cast people who can carry a romance show, whether that's a reality show or a scripted show.
The
They need to
opposite end
be
of this is Your Place or Mine, starring Reese Witherspoon and Ashton Kutcher, one of the worst rom-coms ever made. And I feel like
uh,
that is actually the greatest indication of like a studio head being like, we got it. Tropes, two cities, like friends to lovers trope, and 2 stars.
yeah.
We did it. We cracked it.
Ugh, it's
No,
so
they
bad.
spent a lot of money on a piece of actual garbage.
Yeah, just like you feel nothing watching it.
It's empty in every sense. As
Yeah,
empty as Ashton Kutcher's kitchen cabinets in that film.
and you know what else? Like Mel Owens, I'm sorry, could not make
Oh,
me convinced that he had chemistry through like 95% of his season of The Golden Bachelor.
right. I
Like
don't care that he was a football player.
I don't care. And, like, he seems by in many ways like, I can see why they cast him. He's a very interesting guy with a lot going on, a renaissance man, very
He
accomplished, very
reads.
smart. But
He
there
couldn't
was
sell it.
no there's no ability to sell it. You need to cast people who are and unlike Mel, comfortable with the concept of what they're doing. There needs to be buy-in.
That's so true. That is so true. You're right. With Mel, it was a total buy-in problem. You
Huge buy-in
cannot have a
problem.
person, yeah, on literally every level. He was like, I don't want to be on reality TV and I want to date a 45-year-old. So it should be an
Yeah.
indication like this wasn't the right guy. Again, very happy for him and Peg. They seem
Yeah.
wonderful together, but like as a television show, it did not give us the thing
Yeah, it
that we
suffered.
wanted. Yeah.
Exactly. Casting is so huge. And I also think that the sort of untraditional structure of the Heated Rivalry romance is also an interesting line to go down. It's a romance that basically starts with them barely speaking and just like meeting up for sex for like 2 episodes. And that's not usually how we see traditional romance media, like romance novels or rom-coms begin. Like they fall in love through a different avenue. And I think that The Bachelor is in this very regimented, like, this is how love happens structure that, there's a fear of moving too far away from that structure because that is the one that's brought them so much success. But I think it's calcified in a way that has made it boring. There's nothing unexpected to people about how the show progresses. You know what each season is gonna be. They're gonna hit these notes, one-on-one date, maybe they get a second one-on-one date. they have a fantasy suite and like maybe then they get to have sex, but they won't tell you. And then there's a proposal.
It just occurred to me that Love Island disrupts that model a bit because
Yes.
they are making out from the moment we see them on our screens.
Yes. That is, I think, a huge part of why Love Island is like making huge gains and why it has, I think, possibly overtaken The Bachelor. I'm not totally sure of the numbers, but in terms of cultural salience, like it has, I think, overtaken The Bachelor at this point because it does offer a different look at how love can develop. And for a lot of people who are out there, you know, having situationships and hooking up, like this idea that you just go on a couple really nice dates with a guy and then he meets your parents and then you get engaged is so alien. And it doesn't show a kind of romance that is likely to like evolve in their real life. And so, yeah, is The Bachelor just going to be Love Island? No, but I do think you're right. That's why we're seeing a show like Love Island where everyone just makes out the first time they meet.
Right. And Love
We're
is
seeing it take
Blind
off.
disrupts the Bachelor model in a totally different way. But I think that's what we're saying is that there's not like one thing that a show should do. It's that I think we need to be more fearless when it comes to experimenting with the form and giving people a variety of visions of what love can be and anchoring all of that again in telling a great story.
Yeah. Just tell us a story that's exactly like Ilya and Shane, and I won't complain about this season of The Bachelor. If there's ever a season of The Bachelor again.
Hey, we're getting Taylor Frankie Paul,
This
okay?
is my
The
last
Bachelorette is coming.
maybe my last question is like what does Taylor Frankie Paul is her season gonna maybe bring anything that relates to these lessons that we're pulling from Heated Rivalry, or is that maybe a step in a different direction?
I think we don't know, to be
Yeah.
honest, right? I could
Yeah.
see her season going in many different directions. Like in some way, if we're talking about like an equality of power dynamics, we've spoken about this before, but Taylor Frankie Paul is a reality star. She is experienced. So like certainly the power dynamic between herself and production is very different than what we've seen before. There was
Mhm.
clearly an effort made to cast someone who we know has the ability to radiate chemistry on screen. How
Yeah.
those things will play out is an open question, and I think it could go really well or really poorly. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel that we know the answer to that yet.
Yeah. No, that's true. The power dynamic thing, I think, is an interesting element to this that would not be present in a Bachelor version of a celebrity
Mhm.
cast lead, which is interesting because we have been talking about how great it would be to do celebrity casting for The Bachelor as well. But I think that fucks with the power dynamic, whereas Taylor Frankie Paul, it kind of equalizes it in a nice way. And I'm interested to see how that will play out. I don't know if I'm convinced that it will play out as a Heated Rivalry style
Yeah, I'm
romance,
not I don't think
but
either of us
maybe.
is convinced. There's obviously a lot of potential also for at least elements of a more like backlashy type of
Yeah.
vibe.
My guess is it will be a mixed bag.
I agree. I think that is what I'm thinking. I feel quite convinced that it will be entertaining, and I think in all of the other ways it will be a mixed bag.
Yeah. And I think we have to end it there because
We simply
we
must.
simply must. We can't keep talking about Heated Rivalry forever. We're going to take it to the group chat. But thank you so much for joining us for this little detour into the world of Canadian hockey romance.
And on that note, that is it for this episode of Love to See It with Emma and Claire. If you're watching this on YouTube, as always, remember to like and subscribe to our channel.
Love to See It is a presentation of Odyssey. The show is produced by us, Claire Fallon and Emma Gray. Our production assistant is Tatiana Knie-Smith, who also edits our video. This episode was edited by John Bahar. Our theme music is by Tamar Haviv, and our art is by Aaron Nestor.
If you like our show, remember to follow us everywhere that you would any podcast. Rate us 5 stars, leave a review. All of this really helps other people find our show. And of course, tell all of your friends about Love to See It.
If you want to get in touch, you can email us at claireandemmapod@gmail.com.
You can also find us on TikTok at Love to See It Pod and on Instagram at Claire and Emma Pod. And you can find our newsletter Rich Text on Substack at claireandemma.substack.com. I'm also on Blue Sky at Emma Gray and on Instagram at Emma Lady Rose.
And I'm at Claire E. Fallon. Special thanks to the team at Odyssey, Eric Donnelly, Peter Arriaga, Kate Rose, Moira Curran, Alyssa Wester, and Hillary Ship.
We'll be back soon.
Can you keep up?